Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something super interesting, the psychology of money.
Yeah,
We're going to be looking at excerpts from Morgan Housel's book.
that's right.
And I think this is going to be a little bit different than just like your typical finance lecture. This is really about
Right.
understanding how our emotions and our histories and all the stories that we tell ourselves influence our decisions about money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Sometimes our brains work against us.
it really is like we all know we should be rational, we should make smart financial choices,
Right?
but it feels like something's working against us sometimes. And Housel does a great job, I think, of unpacking those seemingly irrational behaviors
Right.
and helping us to understand why we do the things we do with money, even when it doesn't necessarily make logical sense.
So you're telling me there's a reason why someone who can barely afford rent will buy a lottery ticket?
There is. Yeah, and we're gonna dive into that.
'Cause that's always baffled me.
But, first I'm curious, have you ever noticed how your own experiences have kind of shaped your views on money?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Growing up in a family that was very careful with money, I've always been really risk averse. Like, even now, I'm hesitant to spend money sometimes, even when I know I can afford it.
sure. And that's a perfect example of what Housel calls our own money story.
Ah.
And that's this idea that all of us come to the table
Yeah.
with our own set of experiences and our own
Yeah.
influences. And
Hmm.
and he talks about things like inflation and recessions and
Right.
market booms and even those kind of like personal financial wins and losses that we all experience.
Right. So, like, if you live through the high inflation of the 1970s,
Yeah.
you're going to have a much different outlook than someone who grew up when prices were stable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what makes judging someone's financial choices
Right.
or even judging our own choices incredibly difficult.
Right.
Because what seems crazy to one person
Yeah.
might make perfect sense to another person, all because of their own unique money background.
It's like we're all playing the same game with different rule books.
I like that analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of empathy and understanding, when it comes to financial decisions.
Right.
There's rarely a one-size-fits-all approach.
So let's talk about success then.
Okay.
Um, when we see these sort of rags to riches stories, how much of that is about skill and how much of it is just luck?
The age-old debate of luck versus skill.
Right. Yeah. Like, are we?
And this is something that Housel explores in depth, particularly when he's talking about, some of these big financial success stories.
Hmm.
And he really argues that it's almost impossible to separate the two.
Right.
Like you can't,
He uses Bill Gates as an example,
he does, yeah.
where he says that just the fact that Bill Gates went to Lakeside School,
Right.
which was one of the only schools that had a computer terminal,
One of the few at the time, yeah.
was what put him on this trajectory to become, the tech titan that he is.
Yeah.
What if he had gone to a different school?
Exactly. It was a 1 in a million chance that set him on that trajectory.
Mm.
And I think it makes you wonder, would Microsoft even exist today
Right.
if he'd gone to a different school? And so,
Yeah.
I think it really highlights the influence that
He
chance
really does.
plays in shaping outcomes.
So sometimes just being in the right place at the right time is almost as important as hard work or talent or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's another side to that coin as well, and that's risk.
Oh.
So Housel talks about the example of John D. Rockefeller and Cornelius Vanderbilt,
Oh.
who were both, incredibly successful entrepreneurs,
Mm.
but took massive risks in order to achieve those fortunes.
So for them, it paid off.
Yeah, for them it paid off, but it could have easily backfired, right?
Right.
Like that's the thing about risk.
Hey.
It's so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And while it can lead to these huge rewards,
Right.
it can also lead to disastrous consequences.
So what's the takeaway then? Should we all just throw caution to the wind?
Well, I don't know if I would say throw caution to the wind,
Okay.
but I think the lesson here is about humility.
Okay.
Both in our successes and in our failures.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing that luck might have played a role in those successes.
Right.
And that sometimes, despite our best efforts, things just don't go our way.
And that we don't have complete control over everything.
Right.
Okay.
And it's okay to celebrate those wins,
Yeah.
but also being forgiving of ourselves and others when things don't go according to plan.
So let's talk about this idea of enough.
Okay.
It seems like no matter how much we achieve, there's always that pressure to have more,
Yeah.
to be more, to
Mhm.
earn more.
That's such a great observation. And it speaks to one of the, I think, most challenging financial skills to master,
Yeah.
which is getting the goalpost to stop moving.
Right.
Housel argues that defining enough is crucial because without that definition, we're constantly chasing a higher standard,
Uh,
even when we've already achieved a level of wealth that should, in theory, make us content.
And he uses Rajat Gupta as an example, right? The former McKinsey CEO who was convicted of insider trading, even though he already had a net worth of over $100 million.
Yeah, he had all the money in the world you would think, and yet
Right.
he still felt the need to chase more.
It's almost like it's not even out the money at that point.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, is it
Right.
is it about the money or is it something deeper?
Yeah, like,
Is it a need for validation or a fear of losing what they've built?
right. Like, what's the psychology behind that?
That's a fascinating point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it really speaks to the idea that maybe contentment isn't tied directly to our net worth,
Mm-hmm.
but to our ability to manage our expectations and find fulfillment in things outside of just material possessions.
But I think we get so caught up in that comparison game.
That's
We
right.
do. We're always looking at what other people have.
Yeah. And social media doesn't help with that at all.
No.
It's a constant barrage of,
Right.
curated perfection that makes all of us feel inadequate.
Absolutely. So how do we break free from that comparison trap?
Yeah, how do we define enough in a world that's constantly telling us that we need more?
Right.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something that we're going to explore further as we go deeper into Housel's insights.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay. One of the most powerful tools, actually, for combating that feeling of never enough is gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
Seems too easy.
It sounds cliche, but hear me out.
Okay.
When we focus on what we are grateful for,
Right.
it shifts our perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
We start to appreciate what we have rather than dwelling on what we lack.
So it's almost like instead of comparing yourself to other people, you're comparing yourself to your past self.
Exactly.
You're looking at how far you've come.
Yeah, and that can be so freeing
Yeah.
because it allows us to step off that treadmill of comparison
Right.
and find contentment in the present moment.
Okay, so gratitude plays a big role there, but let's talk about compounding a little bit.
Um, we all know it's important, but it's so hard to wrap your head around.
I agree. Yeah, it's often called like the eighth wonder of the world
Yeah.
for a reason.
Right.
It's this incredible force that allows these small, consistent actions to create huge results over time.
And the best example is Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not just a smart investor, but he's been doing it for 70 years.
Right. It's that longevity
Right.
that really allows those gains to compound. And Housel actually does this thought experiment in the book.
Oh.
He calculates what Buffett's net worth would be if he had started investing at 30 and retired at 60.
Oh, wow. So like most people.
Like a lot of people do, yeah.
So what's the difference?
99.9% lower.
Wow.
It's crazy, right?
So time really is the most important asset.
It really is. Yeah. It's not about finding that one get-rich-quick scheme.
Right.
It's about making consistent, smart choices over decades.
And it's resisting that urge to try to get those short-term gains. Exactly. And he uses this analogy of a hard drive storage capacity to kind of illustrate this point.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
So for decades, the progress in hard drive storage capacity was very slow and steady,
Right.
almost imperceptible.
Mm-hmm.
But then it exploded, right?
Yeah.
Like we went from, megabytes to terabytes.
Yeah, it's like it's just all those small improvements, all of a sudden they hit a tipping point and then
Oh, massive growth.
massive growth.
And that's the magic of compounding.
Yeah,
It often feels like nothing's happening.
right.
And then all of a sudden,
It explodes.
you're reaping these rewards of all those consistent efforts.
So how do we harness the power of compounding?
Well, we can't all be Warren Buffett,
Right.
but
Right.
we can adopt some of those key principles.
Yeah.
Starting early is crucial,
Okay.
even if it's with small amounts.
Right.
Consistency is key, and finding a solid investment strategy you're comfortable with and sticking to it.
So just playing the long game,
Exactly.
trusting the process.
Yep. And not getting swayed by those emotional ups and downs of the market.
All right, so let's move on to another concept that you talked about, which is room for error.
Okay.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because life just rarely goes according to plan.
It really doesn't.
And it seems like the more rigid our plans are, the harder we fall when things go wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's exactly what Housel is getting at.
Okay.
He uses this example of blackjack card counters to illustrate the point.
Okay.
They're incredibly skilled at tilting the odds in their favor,
Right.
but they never bet everything
Oh,
because they know they could be wrong.
they're leaving room for error.
Exactly. They understand that even with a good strategy, things can and do go wrong.
So how do we apply this to our own financial lives?
Well, there are a few things you can do.
Oh,
First, have a cash reserve.
okay.
That's your financial cushion
Right.
for those unexpected events.
Right?
Job loss, medical emergency, car breaking down.
That peace of mind.
Yeah.
Executive. Second, avoid over-leveraging yourself with debt.
Okay.
Debt amplifies losses
Right.
and can really turn, small financial bumps in the road into mountains.
It's about being really aware of how much risk you're taking on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the most challenging aspect of this is being prepared for our emotions to take over,
Oh, yeah.
especially during times of market volatility.
Yeah. I mean, intellectually, I know that the market goes up and down,
Right.
but when you see your investments taking a hit, it's hard not to panic.
It's a normal human reaction, right? We're
Right.
not robots, but having that room for error,
Right.
both financially and emotionally,
Mhm.
can help us weather those storms and avoid making those rash decisions.
Right. Just taking a deep breath, remembering your long-term goals,
Exactly.
and knowing that you've built in that resilience to your plan.
So let's talk about this idea of embracing reasonable over rational.
Okay, so what's the difference? Aren't they the same thing?
Oh, not quite.
Housel argues that striving for these perfectly rational financial decisions can actually be counterproductive.
Really?
Yeah, it can lead to analysis paralysis,
Mm-hmm.
unrealistic expectations,
Okay.
and a lot of unnecessary stress.
So we get so caught up in trying to make the perfect decision based on all the data
Exactly.
that we miss the forest for the trees.
We forget that we're humans, not robots.
Right.
We have emotions and values and individual circumstances
Mhm.
that defy those neat, rational models.
He tells that story of Harry Markowitz, who was a Nobel Prize-winning economist,
I know.
who came up with the formula for the optimal portfolio allocation.
Right.
But guess what? He didn't even use it for his own retirement.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's like even the experts know that real life is messy.
Exactly.
So what's the takeaway for the average listener then? How do we do this? How do we embrace reasonable over rational?
Well, it starts by recognizing that it's okay to prioritize peace of mind
Okay.
over squeezing out those last few percentage points of return. Sometimes good enough is truly good enough.
So it's about letting go of that need for optimization
Yeah.
and just trusting your gut a little bit.
And speaking of trusting your gut, let's talk about the role of narratives in shaping our financial behavior.
Okay, what do you mean by narratives?
Well, Housel argues that the stories that we tell ourselves
Mm-hmm.
about the economy, the markets, even about money itself,
Right.
have this huge impact on our decisions,
Okay.
even if those stories don't align with reality.
So if you believe that the market is going to crash, even if there's no evidence, you're going to make decisions based on that,
Based on that belief.
based on that fear.
Exactly. We all have these underlying narratives, these
Mhm.
lenses through which we view the world.
It's like we're all walking around with these stories in our heads.
Yeah, and those stories are influencing how we perceive risk and opportunity,
Wow.
and even our own financial capabilities.
So how do we become more aware of these narratives, and how do we make sure they're not leading us astray?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we're going to explore further in just a little bit.
Okay.
But first, let's take a closer look at one of Housel's key distinctions,
Okay.
the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Okay, so we're talking about the difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Right. It seems like those words are used interchangeably, but there's a deeper meaning there.
There is. Yeah, think of it this way.
Yeah.
Rich is your current income.
Okay.
It's flashy. It's
Yeah.
that kind of in-your-face display of wealth. But wealth is different.
Well,
Wealth is what you don't spend.
okay.
It's having those assets that give you control and flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
the resources that allow you to make choices that are aligned with your values.
It's like you can be rich and broke at the same time.
Exactly.
You might have a high income, but if you're spending it all to keep up with the Joneses,
Right.
you're not building any real wealth.
Exactly. True wealth is about options and freedom.
Right.
It's about having that financial security to pursue your passions,
Right.
to weather those inevitable storms,
Mm-hmm.
and to make choices that are in your best long-term interests.
So how do we shift our focus from things to true wealth?
I think it starts with examining our spending habits.
Okay.
Are we spending to impress others
Right.
or to fulfill a genuine need?
Mm-hmm.
Are we caught in a cycle of lifestyle inflation where every raise or bonus is met with an increase in spending?
So being mindful of where our money is going.
Exactly. And recognizing that saving isn't about deprivation, it's about empowerment.
Okay.
Every dollar we save is a dollar we're investing in our future selves,
Mm-hmm.
giving us more options, more freedom down the line.
Housel says that saving is like finding more energy by using
I
less.
like that analogy.
Yeah,
So true, right?
it's counterintuitive.
It is.
But it's like if you conserve your energy, you can actually do more later on.
Exactly.
So it's not about scarcity, it's about creating future abundance.
I love that. Okay, so let's circle back to those narratives
Okay.
that we were talking about.
The stories we tell
Yeah,
ourselves
it's
about the economy and the markets.
yes, and how powerful those can be, even if they're not accurate or helpful.
Right, like when we see those stories of people getting rich quickly, it distorts our perception of risk.
Exactly. Or if we grow up believing that money is scarce and hard to come by,
Right.
we might avoid taking risks or pursuing opportunities that could really benefit us.
So how do we become more aware of those and make sure they're not leading us astray?
Well, it starts with becoming more conscious of the information we're consuming.
Okay.
Where are we getting our financial news and advice?
Mm-hmm.
Are we relying on, sensationalized headlines? Or are we seeking out balanced and informed perspectives?
Just being a critical thinker.
Absolutely. And being willing to challenge our own assumptions and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Where did those beliefs come from?
Right.
Are they based on facts and evidence?
Okay.
Or are they just stories we've been told or that we've told ourselves?
It's like we have to do an inventory of our own mental models.
Right, and recognize that those perceptions aren't always objective reality.
So we talked about narratives, the difference between being rich and wealthy, the power of saving, this idea of embracing reasonable over rational.
Right. I think that's such an important concept.
It's so counterintuitive.
It is.
So how do we know when to let go of that need for perfect rationality?
I think it comes down to trusting our intuition,
Okay.
recognizing that those gut feelings often have really valuable information,
Mm-hmm.
even if we can't fully explain it logically.
Sometimes you just get a sense that something's right or wrong.
Exactly. And I think it's important to honor those feelings.
Okay.
Now, of course, we shouldn't make decisions solely based on emotion,
Right.
but we shouldn't discount the role of intuition in our financial lives.
So finding that balance between the data and the fearing.
Beautifully said. And sometimes that means, seeking out advice from trusted sources,
Right.
whether it's a financial advisor, a therapist, or even a wise friend or mentor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Someone
Yeah.
to give you a different perspective.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Knowing what we now know about the psychology of money,
Mm-hmm.
those emotions and stories and biases that drive our decisions,
Yeah.
how can we use this understanding to not just make smarter financial choices,
Okay.
but also to lead more fulfilling and meaningful lives?
It's not just about the numbers. It's about aligning our money with our values,
Exactly.
with what really matters to us.
It's about recognizing that money is a tool,
Right.
a powerful tool, but it should serve us, not the other way around.
Using money to create freedom and opportunity and to make a difference,
Well said.
not just to buy more stuff.
As you go forward, think about how you can use this understanding of money psychology
Okay.
to make choices that are both financially sound
Right.
and aligned with what truly matters to you.
It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Exactly.
We're all learning and growing.
If you want to explore these ideas further, I highly recommend checking out Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money.
Awesome book.
It's a great read.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening,
We hope you learned something.
and we'll see you next time.